Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're looking at a couple of real market mysteries. First, a strange, almost clockwork-like pattern in Bitcoin's daily price, and then there's this tech company that seems to be playing by a whole different set of financial rules. So, what are the hidden forces really moving the markets right now? We're going to investigate two fascinating puzzles today. You've got this strange recurring pattern in Bitcoin, and then you have this unshakable belief from big institutions in a tech company that on paper looks ridiculously overvalued. Okay, let's dive right in.
All right, first up, let's talk about Bitcoin. There is this really troubling and honestly super predictable pattern that's been showing up in the market.
So check this out. It's happening almost every single day like clockwork. Right when Wall Street opens for business, Bitcoin's price just plummets. But then, almost magically, a lot of that loss gets recovered right before the market closes. I mean, this pattern is so reliable, speculators are actually making a killing off of it.
Right, so these speculators are definitely cashing in, but here's the thing, they're just riding the wave. They didn't start it. So that brings us to the real million-dollar question. Who is behind all this relentless daily selling, and what's their motive?
You know, when you look at the usual suspects, the common explanations, they just don't really add up. People throw around ideas like the four-year cycle or miners selling off their coins, maybe tax loss harvesting, but none of those really explain the timing. Why every day at that specific time? And like we said, the speculators are just amplifying the trend, not starting it. The real story here is a little more complex and a lot more interesting.
Okay, so the actual answer, it's a bit more complicated. And it points to a kind of crisis that's been happening behind the scenes. We're talking about the big players, the ones who actually keep the crypto markets liquid and running smoothly.
It really all traces back to a major market shock that happened on October 10th. That single event completely walloped some of the key crypto market makers. You know, these are the firms whose whole job is to provide liquidity, to make sure you can easily buy and sell. Well, they suffer these massive, totally unexpected losses, and it just blew a giant hole in their balance sheets.
And we're talking about severe damage here. Some of these firms have been forced to liquidate up to half of their crypto holdings. We're talking Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, all just to stay afloat and keep the lights on.
So you see, this is the crucial point. This isn't strategic selling. It's not about trying to time the market. This is purely about survival. These guys are being forced to sell assets every single day just to get some cash. And they're doing it pretty much as soon as the US markets open because that's when there's enough liquidity. And that is what's creating this super predictable daily price drop.
Okay, so we've just seen how some hidden financial distress can create these really weird market patterns. Now, let's pivot. We're going to look at another market paradox, but this one's a whole different story. It's not driven by distress, it's driven by this incredible, almost unshakable conviction.
And that brings us to Palantir. This is a company whose stock price just seems to defy all traditional logic.
I mean, look at this. On one hand, you have its valuation. The multiples it's trading at are just outrageous. People have called them wild, even descabellados in Spanish, which means crazy or harebrained. But on the other hand, you've got the big institutional players, the so-called smart money, and they are not selling. In fact, they're buying and holding their positions. So what gives? What do they see? Well, the answer to this whole paradox really lies in what Palantir actually does. They provide a technology that is not just unique, but for its customers, it's becoming completely indispensable. Essentially, what these big institutions are betting on is that Palantir has created what you'd call a de facto monopoly. Now, that doesn't mean they're an official monopoly legally speaking. It means their product is so essential, so woven into the fabric of their clients' operations that they might as well be. And this is a great way to understand their value. Think about how a huge company or government agency handles its data. It's often a total mess, right? It's like trying to run a supercomputer on an old MS-DOS system from the 80s. Just tons of dispersed, unconnected files everywhere. What Palantir does is come in and acts like a brand new modern operating system for all that data. It organizes it, it unifies it, and it turns all that chaos into a single clear interface where you can actually make real-time decisions. It's a game changer. And that leads to the killer question these big investors are asking themselves. What other option do they have? For these huge organizations that are literally drowning in data, Palantir's platform has become so essential, there just aren't really any other good alternatives out there. So let's step back for a second. What does all this mean for the markets? What can we learn from these two stories that, on the surface, seem totally unrelated? Well, here are the key takeaways. For Bitcoin, that daily price drop isn't really about what the crowd thinks. It's being driven by forced, non-strategic selling from these distressed financial players. And with Palantir, its incredible value isn't just a bubble. It's rooted in the fact that it's created a de facto data monopoly, making it indispensable to its clients. The core insight here, you absolutely have to look beyond the surface price to understand the real underlying structural forces that are at play.
And that kind of leaves us with one final, pretty big question to think about. As data becomes arguably the world's most powerful asset, and these platforms that can organize it all become more and more powerful, what exactly is guarding our privacy? Who's looking out for the regular person in all of this?